thing I would say is like I feel like sports unites people, and that's kind of what this feels like too. It's just bringing people together where they can find joy in something. I think that's what's so beautiful about sports, and what I really love about it, and what I've loved about it my whole life is some of my best memories from being a kid or spending time with my family or my friends have been around sports, and how that brings people together. So that's exactly what this feels like, and I'm sure I'll remember this, for the rest of my life.
Caitlin Clark. She, who emerged with an overwhelming impact in college basketball and soon moved to the WNBA, is changing the way people see the sport. It's not just about precise shots or surgical passes. It's about her magnetic charisma, her unshakable confidence, and how, in very little time, she became a global icon. Clark received the coveted Athlete of the Year title at an impressive speed, surpassing barriers and expectations. Some say it was like a hurricane, sweeping through the WNBA landscape and redefining the standards that kept the league stable and predictable. Until recently, the spotlight belonged to already established names, with A'ja Wilson at the center of the constellation. However, now, this sovereignty seems threatened. The feeling is that suddenly the league has found a new reference, and the inevitable question is, what's left for those who dominated the scene in recent years? Deep down, everyone knows that women's basketball was going through a moment of ascension, but Clark's arrival accelerated this in an unpredictable way. Her performances, followed by historic records and audiences, shook any sense of comfort, and this discomfort becomes a powerful ingredient in the plot. After all, how will those who until then reigned peacefully react? The tension begins to rise, and what was once a solid reign now finds itself threatened by the rising new star. A'ja Wilson is not a common player. Over the past few years, her presence has consolidated as a reference in women's basketball. MVP, champion, face of advertising campaigns, central figure of an ecosystem that had been growing gradually. Wilson, with her talent and firmness, personified the peak of the post-startup era WNBA, the assurance that the league had found its perfect ambassadors to expand relevance and audience. She was an uncontested figure within the universe of the sport, at least until now. Caitlin Clark's meteoric appearance begins to reposition the pieces on the board. She hasn't just won individual titles and audience records, she's attracted attention from casual viewers, new sponsors, and even celebrities. And in doing so, she shifted the media lens that was previously firmly focused on Wilson. If before the debate revolved around how A'ja Wilson would lead the WNBA in the future, now the narrative transforms into how will A'ja react to the Clark phenomenon. It's not about taking away Wilson's merits. Her talent is unquestionable. But the truth is that the dynamic has changed. Established players now see an ambitious rookie, newly arrived, displaying numbers and performances that go beyond simple comparisons. Suddenly, there's a possibility that the once unshakable throne has found serious competition. The climate of dispute and the aura of uncertainty sets the stage for better understanding what's behind the Caitlin Clark phenomenon. Caitlin Clark isn't just sharp shooting or creative passes. She embodies a unique style, almost defying logic by converting unthinkable shots. Her trademark is long-distance shots, the ones that make the crowd hold their breath. In one instant, everything seems impossible. In the next, the ball glides through the net, provoking screams, applause, and the famous, "I can't believe what I just saw." But it's not just on the court that Clark shines. Her presence goes beyond the four lines of the floor. The media follows her wherever she goes, fans make endless lines for an autograph, and she ends up becoming a topic even in unlikely corners, from traditional sports broadcasts to conversations in distant cafes. This power of attraction stirs the audience's imagination and, of course, bothers those who were previously used to being the center of attention. Clark's rise doesn't occur in a vacuum. The WNBA was already experiencing growth in audience and relevance. However, with her arrival, interest exploded, overflowing beyond the specialized audience. Suddenly, people who never paid attention to women's basketball are there, ecstatic about the contagious energy of a young player. She is the symbol of a new era, a turning point where the game ceases to be niche and reaches viewers of all ages, genders, and backgrounds. If Clark won hearts, she also awakened tensions. It's time to look more closely at how this impacts relationships within the league. In the locker room, behind the scenes, between the lines of public statements, there's a subtle discomfort. Not that A'ja Wilson will clearly express direct jealousy, that word rarely comes up. But the discomfort is there, hanging in the air. Those who until yesterday were seen as the maximum reference, today find themselves constantly compared to the new sensation. And comparisons can be unfair, disturbing, and sometimes awaken complex feelings. Some episodes in the season left certain tension in the air. More physical plays, crossed looks, debates about media space, and about how the public embraces the new star, while veterans need to fight to maintain relevance. All this is part of the psychological game that has been installed. It's not just about competing for titles or trophies, but for the dominant narrative, for the spectator's eyes, and for the ability to inspire the next generation. In this sense, Clark's exposure as a media icon highlights the feeling that, before her, other players might fall behind. Although competitiveness is normal in sports, there's fear that the entire league will revolve around a single name, overshadowing those who dedicated years to building this stage. It's time to understand how the market, media, and sports marketing itself contribute to these attention imbalances. If there's a positive side to all this upheaval, it's the substantial increase in WNBA visibility. Previously relegated to alternative schedules, today games involving Clark attract notable audience ratings. Sponsors notice this. Broadcasters adjust their programming schedules. Comments inflame social networks. There's no doubt the league has entered a higher level than before. However, all this growth poses an intriguing question: how to value new stars without erasing the previous ones. The WNBA built its credibility with the help of several brilliant athletes, including A'ja Wilson, who carried on her back much of the responsibility of showing the world the quality of women's basketball. Now, with Clark dominating the headlines, there's a risk that past contributions will be minimized in favor of the new fever. The dispute isn't just about technical skills, but also about legacies. In a not-so-distant future, history will tell who really redefined the sport. And this isn't just about statistics or records, it's about how fans will remember the transformation of the sport. Perhaps Wilson feels, even if veiled, that she needs to react to not be just a previous chapter to the Clark phenomenon. The pressure increases and forces veterans to revisit their approach, while the league needs to balance past, present, and future. Renewal is part of any sports cycle. It's natural that new faces emerge, breaking barriers and establishing different standards. But when this happens so quickly and intensely, the challenge is even greater. A'ja Wilson and other experienced players now face a reality where their time of sovereignty seems shorter. And in the midst of this transition, they need to find a way to reposition themselves. If, on one hand, Clark's rise can generate discomfort, on the other, it's a stimulus for evolution. The level of competition tends to rise, games become more disputed, and players are motivated to work on their weaknesses, knowing that public attention is now more critical and observant. This more fierce environment is a gain for the sport. Women's basketball strengthens by having, simultaneously, an emerging star and veterans willing to fight for their place on the podium. The WNBA in this context has the mission of harmonizing these forces, promoting the growth of the sport without letting iconic players get lost in the dust of time. It's a delicate balance that requires sensitivity and strategic vision. In the end, what remains is an arena full of possibilities, tensions, and the expectation of an unpredictable future. The unrest that hangs over the league can be seen as something negative or as a sign of vitality. Wilson's discomfort before the new owner of the place isn't just gratuitous envy, but the spark that can drive exciting rivalries and engaging narratives. Who wins with this? The public, evidently. All those who follow the WNBA know that the next game might have extra pinches of emotion, of challenging looks, of talent proofs put on display without shame. Nobody can predict what will happen. Maybe A'ja Wilson will find a way to reinvent herself and return to being the central figure of the league, showing that her story is still far from the end. Maybe Caitlin Clark will maintain dominance and establish herself as the maximum reference, inspiring an entire generation. Or perhaps a third star will appear on the horizon, causing a new imbalance. Basketball, like life, is dynamic and changeable. Meanwhile, the public observes, vibrates, discusses, and shares. The possible jealousy attributed to Wilson is nothing more than the tip of an emotional iceberg that agitates the sports scene. The WNBA, finally, is more alive than ever, and the tension between the consolidated past and the incandescent future reveals itself as the perfect engine to keep interest high. Players, teams, coaches, sponsors, and fans all will have a role to play in this continuous plot. As the next season approaches, voices in the stands and on social networks multiply. People want to see if Clark will consolidate her reign or if Wilson will bring an overwhelming counterattack. This suspense is, in the end, the necessary seasoning for the sport to continue growing, reinventing itself, and occupying the spotlight it deserves. The future is open, and that's the most exciting thing of all.